today for this conversation, a very important conversation. I want to just preface it with the importance of teacher and student interface. Anything, everything that we do, starting from the school level support to the complex area or the state support, if it's not directly or indirectly impacting that teacher-student interface, we may have to re-examine that practice, or just find out the ways to, impact that interface. So we have principal, classroom teachers, district folks in the room. So just having that tri-level thinking around ways to impact teacher-student interface, the most important part of what we do. So just wanted to ground us with that, and this conversation it applies to classroom, it applies to grade level teams, department teams, it applies to school level thinking of systems, it applies to district support for the classroom teachers, and the same thing for the state office folks. So because it's student engagement, maybe groups of 3, if you want to team up, and you're welcome to join us here also because we're a small group. Jot down rapid fire, find out who's the quickest recorder in your group, maybe with a marker there.
You slid out of here. You had already volunteered.
Yeah, thank you, Darlene. And while you're doing that, if you can real quick with your name and where you're from with your team, please. Introduce yourself.
What high school?
This is really rapid fire, words or phrases. What constitutes student engagement? Short phrases for quick recording will work. Rapid fire responses. Mahalo for introducing and sharing your place. You're from? There is no minimum or maximum. Let's wrap up our last thought. Hindsight 2020, now I realize I could have done a workshop window, which is an hour and a half long, actually. So these are like 50 minutes long. So I did not realize that I had the option. I could punch that in when I signed up for this. But anyway, so it is still like a mini workshop setting. You're noticing that. And connecting to, just keep these questions in mind that were posed by our keynote speakers today before, in the morning and after lunch also. How can we find the full potential of our community? How can we create a world where every learner is recognized? And are you a teacher or a school? The question posed by our poet presented, the keynote presenter. Just keep these in mind in the background as we talk about, as we have these conversations.
How does it feel to have a phrase in the dictionary named after your phrase, aha moments? That's crazy.
You know what the wonderful thing about aha, though, is? I can't even remember how early on during the show days I started saying it. But this is the thing about an aha moment, and I love having them, where you think you've never thought of it that way before.
Right.
But an aha really is, think about this, you can't have an aha unless you already knew it. So the aha is a remembering of what you already knew, articulated in a way to resonate with your own truth. So the aha isn't somebody teaching you something. The aha is somebody helping you to remember.
That's an aha moment for me.
That's an aha.
I didn't think about that.
That's what it is.
So look for your ahas. There's nothing new under the sun you're going to hear from me, but really making those connections to what you already know. So that's the intent here, not claiming to be introducing something that's out of the world. So I always model this classroom practices, knowing our goal. What is our intended learning for the day? It's really learning about different dimensions of, or deepening understanding, if I may, deepening understanding about different dimensions of engagement in a standard-based learning environment. That's the system we are in. And this is how you will be successful if you're able to do in the form of I can. Permission to go with these? Hope this is what you were expecting out of this conversation. So let's begin with the first one, different dimensions of classroom engagement. Just to, real quick, the department offers SEL, Social and Emotional Learning Survey, 3 times a year. What do you think, and this is for grades 6 to 12 children in our system, students in our system, what do you think the percentages are for these different traits on that survey for SEL? Percent favorable responses from students on these. What do you think the state, this is all statewide. How many of our kids, and these are 65,000 responses, said favorably about these traits? What percentage do you think?
Each one?
Each one. What might be the range in these? Like 70 to 90%, 20 to 30%?
40 to 60.
Yeah, 40 to 60.
Yeah.
40 to 60 range. What might be the lowest? What might be the highest?
Lowest.
Number of favorable responses.
Growth mindset, grit, emotional regulation.
Grit. Motion regulation.
Which one might be the lowest?
The lowest is probably.
One thing about this survey, like middle answer is considered low, so it might come out lower than that.
Yeah, the favorable response is, if it's a 5-point scale, it's 4th and 5th option. If it's a 7-point scale, it's 5, 6, and 7. They do not include neutral responses in the favorable response.
That's why they should get rid of it.
All right, let's see how it aligns with your numbers.
Oh, see, you
So
organize.
knowing this here, a sense of belonging, knowing social awareness and self-management, you know, nationally, you can compare these numbers nationally with national numbers too. This is because they have millions of students' data, and the database is increasing every year because hundreds and hundreds of schools are administering this survey. Another survey we administer is student perception in the classroom of the teacher and the learning environment, the way they feel in the classroom during learning. Same thing. What might be the range here for secondary students 6 to 12?
Very similar.
50.
Similar? What might be the lowest one?
Classroom
Classroom engagement.
We're following you. You know how you organized. You went in descending order or ascending. Oh, no.
Ascending.
Ascending.
And the data is much better for the elementary kids,
It's interesting.
higher
Sixth
in
grade
every
falls off a cliff.
category. However, the trends, the low and high are in the same areas. All right. So when we are designing for maximum student engagement, and that's the question, I need your, not the middle finger. Thank you. I'm using another screen here to help me out. Thank you, Brian. So obviously the question is, what is engagement? What makes student engagement more likely? Fisher Fry and published this article and about the continuum of engagement. Looking at this continuum from active, passive in the middle, and if you go this way, more active. If we go that way, more active too. So when the students engage in the activities in the classroom, these are some behaviors that you see regarding engagement. So obviously you will say this is disengagement, this is engagement. Now think of these practices, look at your list and where some of these live. What you listed, are they all in this on this side of this continuum? Things that you listed. You have this in a handout too, by the way. The second sheet has
I
it.
mean, this is in the investing, right?
Now,
This authentic setting goals, right, would fall into.
he has also extended this.
But that makes it authentic.
So this was the original publication from Berry et al.
And makes it relevant.
He has extended this thinking to when they are working in small groups, engaging with peers, the same continuum applies in a small group work setting. Look at some of the characteristics or behaviors here. Individually, the top row and the bottom row would be in small group setting. Now, what might the teacher have goals? What goals might teacher have for engagement? Sometimes you just want them to pay attention. Like, I want you to follow my lead and complete certain task. It's okay to have this a few minutes of that in your lesson plan. You just want them to participate. But really, the goal is to get them interested in learning and actively involved in the process. And here is the proactive and also be a collaborative learner. So keeping this in mind, many schools do use this framework with students. They actually intentionally teach students about engagement. There is a video in the article. There's an article here that has a video link where this high school teacher is actually letting students describe what those 6 levels are, what does it look like, what does it sound like. They actually act it out, and they monitor, and they have these charts. You see the names here? Students go up there, and they just move them around, and teacher really, along the line, during the lesson or during the day, except this is an elementary school, they keep moving around depending on how attentive they are.
The teachers moving it?
No, the students go up and move it. They move it and zip it. Yes, they're self-assessing. Yes. So they use this as a rubric. They self-assess. Sometimes the teacher would actually, within 10 minutes, and I'll show you an example of what that looks like. This is what this teacher do. There's a video here if you want to watch. This is 5th grade teacher. She, about every 30 minutes or so, or depending on the nature of the lesson, she would ask them to, and they're all trained in this. Modeling practice, model practice before, you think, oh, my students cannot do this. Maybe tomorrow they cannot do this. But with a lot of modeling and practice, she will ask them what the time I was most engaged, so they're reflecting on that, the time I was least engaged, and how could I be more engaged? So they're reflecting and letting the teacher know in real time. So teaching them how, and you will see there are some kids talking about when I'm bored, these are the strategies I use to get me out of that mode. Because the teachers are very intentional about these practices. So the researchers have organized, you know what researchers do always, right? They organize these types of engagement into 3 categories. So whatever your list is, can you real quick write in parentheses, is it a behavior engagement, is it a cognitive engagement, or is it emotional engagement? B, C, or E, in parentheses next to what you wrote on your chart.
This should be behavior. Speaking cognitive or
And it's okay if you're not, like the idea is that you're,
some of them are both.
I'm also assuming that in your roles, you get to host this conversation with your colleagues or with teachers if you're the district level. If you're the school teacher leader, you might be able to. So I'm going to move a little faster so we can at least share all the ideas that are part of this presentation. So if you're not able to finish that, please bear with me. But you got the idea of really recognizing engagement through this lens of types of engagement. And what is most dominant? Now, the question becomes like, what happens when a school's or grade level or a teacher's focus is only on behavioral engagement? What happens if school's effort is really cognitive engagement only? What happens if school is only focusing on emotional engagement? What gets, what gives? Think about that. And hence the session's name. So we're going to talk about the balanced model for optimal learning. And before we go there, let's listen to the authors. By the way, this entire presentation comes from this book, Engagement by Design, by Fisher, Fry, and Quaglia, a student voice known name, and 50 strategies to boost cognitive engagement, creating a thinking culture in the classroom.
We spend so much time in education driven by this thing called the achievement gap. And yeah, we don't want to have an achievement gap, but I think the achievement gap is a byproduct of something else. The achievement gap for me is a byproduct of an engagement gap. The engagement gap meaning when students are engaged, when they're engaged, they're 16 times more likely to be motivated to learn. So when I think of that, if I'm getting kids that are 16 times more motivated to learn, the achievement gap is going to be non-existent. Or there'll still be some achievement gap, of course, for a whole lot of other reasons. But the bottom line is this achievement gap that we're trying to take care of, I think we need to take care of it in a different way. And for us, it's the engagement gap.
Students want challenge, they want to be appreciated, they want to be valued, they want to be cared for. That adds to this idea here of engagement. When I feel valued, when I feel respected, when I have a challenging task, I am more likely to engage. And if I engage, I'm more likely to learn because I'm paying more attention. I'm more likely to practice. I'm more likely to remember. So engagement becomes a thing for students cognitively when we as adults plan really good curriculum and we know how to design tasks that require some struggle, some cognitive work on part of the students.
Please have these in the back of your mind. We're going to have time to talk with each other in a minute. What's resonating with me, given the information you received so far about types of engagement, and also the need for the real need is engagement gap, not necessarily achievement gap. So this is what the model is, the balanced model. There are 3 players in this picture, as you know, and the intersections, relationships, teacher clarity, and challenge, which is the rigor defined in this model, they collectively lead to this, and engagement itself. So when we say balanced model, we talk about everything that we have in place at our school, in our classroom. To what degree we are mindful of these interactions when we're planning for learning. For everybody. Adults, think about just this session alone, like how am I balancing this? Learning or just this conversation itself. And also be mindful of the types of engagements. So coming back to our success criteria, it's time to talk about the examples of strategies and some data needs. Data needs really is, how do I know it's working? What kind of data do I need to collect as we implement whatever we are implementing? It's like progress monitoring, self-study at any level you want to look at, classroom to all the way to the district. So as a team, and because this is so late in the afternoon, if we can, as a group of 2 or 3, can get up and grab a chart that's back there. It has circles on it, just like this model. And next to the interaction, right here maybe on the chart, for this interaction right on this side, And for this interaction, which is the challenge, the rigor on this side, you would create a list of strategies and practices that strengthen that intersection. For the sake of time, you can go deeper into just one, or just say, hey, we're going to, at least let's talk about 3 here, 3 here, and 3 here. Make it work for yourself, please. Grab the marker with you, take it, and you can use other tables for this. And you can stay standing if you choose to. Any table you want to set out. Again, the quickest recorder on the team will do this. Or 2 of you can write on the 2 sides of the chart at the same time. Make it work for you. You okay, Leah?
Inclusion activities. Even like,
That's great.
anything SEL related, anything, like the PBS, SEL lessons.
Challenge,
But I would even say,
open-ended questions.
like, well, any type of cooperative learning.
Questions and tasks.
And then even like project-based learning, right? That's done collaboratively.
These would be practices that are in place or that you know should be in place.
Authentic.
Is self-reflection there too?
That would be good.
Well, sometimes the productive struggle is good because I know like with some elementary schools, I'm not sure where you guys teach, but with like some of the math curriculum, they do, one of the steps is the productive struggle.
Yeah, because sometimes they just give up.
Yeah.
What I've experienced, they give up.
Right.
So how do you teach them to, I mean, you know, we come around and we ask questions and we, you know, can do that, but how do you teach them to continue to look at it from different angles?
Unpacking standards, clear, yeah.
Okay, what else for teacher clarity?
You can just say co-construction.
And then
you can
also
apply
like
that to
assessment,
actually
good
some of
assessment,
these things.
so that you know. Quality assessments.
The challenge, we could say, I was going to say,
Might actually, that might go
self
here
and peer
too.
feedback.
For the challenge.
Right, because that requires
Or maybe
me to evaluate,
what's the good word?
right,
Like a
your work
steps.
or your thinking, right?
Like
Oh,
to
like
get to the
how-
goal,
oh, like
yeah.
a-
Automatically.
Roadmap.
Scaffolding?
Scaffolding, yeah.
What else do we want to add here? I put QFT, because it's just like a question formulation technique is a great process to get kids to learn the difference between open and closed questions, right? And you can
What
apply
about back to relationships?
And
Or like a
pause.
behavior agreement kind of stuff.
Yeah, norm, creating
Norm,
norms
class
together,
norm.
class norms, yeah. There you go.
Now you know why I was saying wish we had a longer. Well, I appreciate you being here after like it's almost 4 o'clock. Appreciate your energy. Appreciate your time and your presence here and your manao with your
Only for you, Ram.
I appreciate it. So let's go a little deeper into what the models are, for what these interactions are, and see how it, like I said, there's nothing new under the sun. It's more like ahas about what we already know. So it describes relations that there are 4 conditions of healthy relationships. As we think about our classroom with our students, where do these live? In what form? What are the strategies that lead to these? That are kind of ingredients for healthy relationships. Nothing different from our spousal relationships, our friends, adult to adult, all of those, right? The book also talks about the invitational and intentional types of adults. This actually says teachers. I just changed it to adults. Uninviting, intentionally inviting, unintentionally inviting, uninviting, and then unintentionally inviting adults. We have had colleagues that you could picture that, oh, I know that so and so, whether they're very intentional and very invitational to, I don't want the kids to bother me during lunch. I don't want to see them after my class. Like literally when I started high school teaching, I would hear that sometimes, you know. So, and then you have teachers that will have like clubs going on before school, after school, lunchtime. The classroom is full of kids. So really awareness of and having this conversation as a group as well might help. So for relationships, we know these 4 conditions. The strategies you have listed, they probably fall in these categories. The environment is invitational. It's psychological and physical both. Equitable relationships, you have this as a handout. LA School County has all teachers trained in this model and the strategies that go along with that. Just briefly skim and scan what those 15 interactions are for teacher and student relationships. There should be in your handout. It's the middle sheet. The front of that sheet has the grouping of how these 15 characteristics are organized, and that table in the back actually describes what those are. So that's a good resource for really looking at the strategies. Obviously, we also know the book talks about the advocacy, when teachers are advocate for students in many forms, offering programs, offering support, services, help, even with the colleagues, even with the administrator of the school. Restorative practices, circles are an example of that. All of those are, they strengthen relationship. So again, in what ways these align with your list of strategies when it came to relationship, what you were thinking? Your SCL program, you might have Choose Love on campus. You might have a PBIS in place in some form that strengthens those. How does that impact your in-classroom interaction and also outside of the classroom interactions? And are they all only for students only? Are adults part of that also? Because research shows that the impact is in modeling itself. If you are not modeling it, don't expect them to show the behavior that you expect them from, but you're not modeling it, right? They don't see walking in the hallways what teachers are doing that you expect from them in the classroom, but they see otherwise outside of the classroom. So it's something to keep in mind. Oops. Now, I posed the question, how would we know? So think about like, what kind of data would you need for, just pick any, like for in this example, for relationships. If you were to assess how well are we doing and how to strengthen that, what kind of data would you have, depending on what kind of activities your campus and your classroom is engaged in? So whatever you have listed, what kind of data will that produce? So that will help you self-monitor if it's those strategies are actually working or not. That's an important part. We drop sometimes at that spot, progress monitoring and assessing whether it's working or not. And that's the reason sometimes you do not see any change over the years, because that progress monitoring piece and plan for that is not in place. Hands down, the major cause of program's not effective over time. We keep doing the same thing over and over, thinking that it will produce result without evaluating the impact. The data shows that it's not working, for example, but we still think it's the best practice. So it comes down to how well are we doing implementing that strategy, or are we complying? Learning target success criteria, yes, they're on the board. Students can probably regurgitate, but do we really engage them in clarifying that intended learning? So the data types, in the interest of time, when I asked a group of teachers when we did this PD, I've done this at 3 different schools. This is the list they came up with. You probably can add more. Thank you. Safe travels or safe drive, whatever is next for you. You got the idea now. So how, and who does this? Do we have a system in place on campus or in my grade level or department? And what system might that be of progress monitoring? So you can see the connection to your comprehensive needs assessment too. And it's not what happens in a classroom in isolation. It's really, are you a teacher or are you a school? That was the question, right? Second one is challenge. What do you suppose students say the number one thing that has to be in place in order for them to learn?
Interesting.
Interesting, motivated,
I'd say it has to be like trust. People have to, they have
Trust.
to feel safe.
safe,
Food and sleep.
food and sleep,
Relevance.
relevance.
I was thinking the why. They need to understand the
They
why.
need to know the relevance of it. It should be meaningful to them and relevance. All of those were responses, but the number one, the majority of the kids said we are bored. We're not challenged enough. And hence this piece in the model, challenge is the rigor. So quickly, you have a handout that has these 8 questions listed. It comes from this book, Cognitive Engagement. And look at these 8 questions that highlight 8 characteristics that ensures high-level cognitive engagement. Just skim and scan quickly, please. Sorry, Brian. Okay, now can somebody read the statement at the bottom, please? Out loud to the whole group.
I can read it.
Thank you, Abby.
In their research, Antonetti and Garber determined that if 3 of the 8 characteristics are present in a classroom, students demonstrate sustained cognitive engagement between 84 and 86% of the time. However, when 2 characteristics are present in classroom engagement, levels drop to 16% of the time and further drop to less than 4% when only 1 characteristic is present.
And they're not talking about all 8.
No.
They're talking about just 3. So these are the chapters in this book. Just to give you, you will have it in the slide if that interests you for your campus. Something to. What I like about this is they have a lot of free stuff on their website, graphic organizers, etc. So sometimes you don't need to buy the book; you can get resources from it. So this particular piece about challenge of rigor talks about what builds expertise. So they're talking about tasks that contribute to critical thinking and also involve struggle. You're talking about peer critiques, there are techniques, so there's a link for you there. Close reading across documents and project, PBL, project-based learning, obviously. That goes without saying. There are some other examples. So the strategy really is invite struggle. The second one are the space practice. These are brain research-based practice, space practice, frequently and over, repeat reading, mnemonics. There are some examples of close reading there. Now, how do we know? Again, the same question, so I'm repeating the pattern here. Data needs for this, that it's happening rigorously. So let's take a couple of minutes. What have we talked about so far? What's resonating? And you can also talk about how would you know that the kids are challenged in your classrooms? Been talking too long? Your time. A couple of minutes. What's resonating so far with you? Whatever we have talked about so far, plus how will we know that it's working? The rigor part.
Like if they're like really thinking higher than. Yeah. Or maybe they're like.
I'm just going to use my phone as it. Yeah, I don't need the notes.
Higher level question. So maybe if they're challenged enough, they're like state testing.
Yeah,
Like
because
as a
then
result.
that's the end.
Right, like long term.
You want to know is
Or like moment.
I like that whole
Collect data.
moving your game.
That's a hard Years ago, I recall West Ed talked about, there's overt and covert engagement.
Well, I
And
guess
covert
we
is
can have
something
like
that
exit
people are
tickets or
thinking,
whatever, like
you can't read
easy
people's
play,
minds.
or
Yeah. So really you can only measure overt engagement. Really can only be measured through
quick feedback.
hear what somebody
Yeah,
says,
yeah.
or you have to see them produce something, whether it's a writing or a drawing or an illustration, whatever, right? And then in terms of challenge, you can look at, all right, well, if they're talking, what are they talking about? What should they respond to? At what level? Are they just recalling information, or are they creating, or are they,
Thank you.
it's all options.
So I'm just trying to make connections here. When we talk about Danielson framework, when we talk about 3B, questioning and discussion techniques, when we talk about using assessment in the service of learning, that lives in all these interactions. So you might have something very powerful, clarifying intending learning for the lesson or for the unit, the teacher clarity piece, but it leads to better relationships as well, just because students are engaged in learning. Same thing, the rigor also comes because your targets are from the standards, and there's enough rigor in our standards if our practices are standards-based. If instruction, assessment, learning activities are tied to standards, it's pretty rigorous already. So just teachers came up with data types that they might need to look at for how would we know that the rigor is in place at our school. And that also include the formative assessment process and tools such as pre-assessment, post-common assessment. We might triangulate data using conversations, observations, and other informal data, anything. All of those are indicators. I am aware of, we only have like 6 minutes left, so let's talk about the last one, teacher clarity. And Fisher and Fry are kind of proposing that teacher clarity is not just knowing your standards. It's much more than that. It's really knowing the entire organization of your curriculum, your course. It's also the clarity of explanation when we talk about learning target success criteria. When we use examples and we use guided practice, that lives in also teacher clarity. When we do pacing guides, curriculum maps that are based on standards, that are based on natural learning progression, all of that lives in teacher clarity. It's not just learning target success criteria from standards. And also assessment of student learning, formatively, informatively, and summatively. Formatively, informatively is the same thing. So there's an example of big picture. Can you paint a picture of your entire course up on the wall in the form of these like 5 or 6 like sheets in a banner? And can you say like, these are the skills that are very common in each of the units? And then we go from weekly to daily learning target and success criteria. Just having that so you can make reference to this all the time with your students. Another big one here that has been like very well received by our teachers is really not only the standards live here, they are just paraphrased student-friendly statements of standards. the students can articulate that what they're doing is the activity, the hands-on part or whatever conversation, so that they can hit these targets. So they can differentiate safe travels, you can differentiate the tasks from the learning target or the standards, and also knowing why that is important. We've been talking about that in all other sessions, knowing the goal and the relevance of it. And then how will we assess, and then what other opportunity, not just the product, conversation, observation, how do we triangulate evidence? And then eventually, last step is what goes in the grade book. How would you organize that? That's all student clarity. Thinking about a student learning log on every Friday. Can they do this, that this week we are learning about, these are the tasks we did, these were the assessments we completed, and these were our success criteria. This is a reflection log. That will give you a lot what they write here, whether you're really doing that standard-based learning. Practices like this in a formative assessment model, student involvement throughout the process, can they articulate learning goals successfully? Can they act on feedback? Can they do peer assessment, peer feedback? All of these are, we call them enablers, so you can help meet their goals. The ultimate goal, one of the longest term goal is, can they track their own learning? Can they share their learning with others? Like what you call them, not parent-teacher conference, but student-led conferencing, where you invite any adult on campus or parents from home. I did that in middle school. That was the year I had to grade the least, if you will. When we say clarify intended learning, not just posting up on the screen, these are the strategies that lead to clarifying intended learning. If we're not doing these, posting is not going to be retained because they're not interacting with what the intended learning is. So really using, these are instructional strategies, but they're also teaching, you're actually teaching them content, what you intend them to learn, that helps them understand what the intended learning is. So when we apply criteria, when we co-construct, when we use work samples, when we unpack descriptors in a rubric, teacher modeling, think aloud in example. That's like you have 4 minutes left, Ram. So, and how would we know that we have teacher clarity on campus? I have as a teacher, the district knows that our schools have that, the principal knows that we have those pieces, how teacher clarity was defined in that 4 bullet points. How would we know? You would have curriculum maps. You would have some interdisciplinary integration, so you understand we don't teach science in isolation too, whether you like it or not as a secondary teacher. We know pacing guides, the standards are prioritized. We have identified essential learning. We know how we analyze standards. Those processes are in place. Student-friendly language in the classroom, in unit planning and lesson planning. Implementation on assessment for learning practices in the classroom. For example, are students clear about the criteria? Are they involved in the feedback? Self-assessment, peer assessment, all of those. If you're in ILT schools, PLCs, data team, their process daily pre-common assessment, all of those checklists. Your school's PD plan alone itself, to what degree does it involve students that enhances, strengthens teacher clarity needs? So is that intentionally a part of your PD and any other you can think of? So this is a list that different audience have come up with when we brainstorm this in a longer workshop setting session. So really, it just doesn't happen. Mahalo for making it to the end of the session. And this is what we began with.
So now you can have us reflect on it, self-assess.
On your
Enjoy
travels
the
back to your
paper.
room or back to your home, while you're driving, reflect back on all the conversations we had. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. And thank you for giving me the audience today. Appreciate it.
Take picture of this.
I do not have any feedback or survey. I don't know if the system has. Yeah, the slide deck, absolutely, but you can screenshot or the bit.ly I had. I can email you.
Yeah, okay, I'll email you.
Yeah, the first slide had it. So. If you want to take a picture of it, Darlene, and that might be this one.
How's your family, Brian?
Thank you, Rob. Yeah. You got that, that's the slide deck. And it has all the links that you need.
Yeah, you too.
Well, yeah. Safe travels.
Thank you, sir. I'm gonna get on the road.
Thank you for
Sure, I'll see you tomorrow.
coming.
Okay, of course. Good to see
I'll
you.
see you. No, I'm not here. I'm at there's a, we have to go to a meeting. Yeah.
No problem.
That's a mandatory.
Well, I will see you soon.
I will. So this align with what you're, Abby?
The meeting was
More.
Okay. If somebody else wants to come from your team, represent you, or yeah. Oh, last time he came, so he stayed. But this time it's really.
Oh, I will.
We only have 30 minutes of 30 minutes with strategy time. It's 4 people presenting actually. Yeah. So there's like state leads coming.
Thanks, Ernest.
Thank you, Darlene. Okay, thanks.